and welcome back around the bonfire. It's the show reminding you that it's your GAM. Use it when you need it. It is a pleasure to have you here as the temperature drops below zero in Chicago. Just Tim and I today, just two guys sitting in a Riverside call talking about soccer because that's what they do. Tim, how are we feeling?
It's my GAM and I want it now. I will never stop making that joke just because it's so ridiculous. Hopefully, at some point in the near future, league roster rule changes make it so that joke is antiquated. But for now, we're still living in the world where teams are writing themselves IOUs to other teams and getting the money back at different points in time for vague interest rate for a currency that doesn't really exist. So here we are.
Yeah, shout out to all the sickos who have any idea what we're referencing here. Look, as always, it's a wonderful day to be talking a little Chicago Fire football. We are going to kick things off. We're going to jump right into it today, I think, with, I don't want to say a somber note. I think maybe it's a little bit sad. Everybody's favorite U22 initiative player, some really incredible memories with the club. Georgios Koutsias officially moved to FC Lugano on a permanent transfer. So shout out to all the Greek people out there. Shout out to Georgios for tucking in his shirt. Yeah, some really wonderful memories in his short stint with Chicago Fire. But he is one of the players of all time. Certainly like a Twitter Hall of Fame guy, personally.
Yeah, man, the tucking a shirt thing is that was a fun moment in an otherwise dour season last year. But obviously, talking about Guti as well is I think the news. But just a second on Koutsias, I think could have been a positive contributor in MLS if he wanted. He wanted to stay in Europe. He wanted to be closer to his family. The team found a way to do that. And I think that ends up being a net positive for everyone. The thing that I had in my back pocket for about 2 months towards the end of the season, he was one goal behind Frank Klopas for most goals scored by a player born in Greece with the Fire. Both in MLS competition and including Frank's Open Cup goals and Koutsi's Leagues Cup goals across all comps. And I just wanted to be able to bring that out and just didn't have the opportunity because he ended up one shy. But that means that Klopas' record stands.
Yeah, but also I feel like that puts Frank Klopas' tenure into a completely different light for me. They don't exist on the same level in my mind. I guess for a lot of reasons, right? But that's surprising to me. Yeah, look, we're excited to see him continue with FC Lugano. He's been playing well since he got there. He will always live in my memory as the day all of that tuck in your shirt stuff happened was also the day I proposed to my wife. So I'm getting texts from family members about that, and also getting texts from friends like, hey, did you see the Chicago Fire Instagram? So you need to look at that. It was a very weird day. Very fun day though. So shout out Guti, hoping all the best for him in the future. And yeah, now we'll talk about the real big fish that was sold into maybe a slightly bigger pond. That being Brian Gutiérrez, officially unveiled as a member of Chivas this week. The fee somewhere in the range of $5 million. An end of an era, I think. Maybe not the best era, but the end of an era. A player who I think has a really large spot in the heart of a lot of Fire fans. And I don't know. I don't know how much we want to sit here and opine about his time into, on the first team. But, I think watching him grow up has been something that a lot of fans will hold near and dear. And now it's an exciting new chapter for him as he moves to his other boyhood club, that he loved growing up. So yeah, very excited for him and excited to see where those next steps go.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to look at it. I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that Brian Gutiérrez is probably, even if he comes back and plays for a few years for the Fire at some point in his career, which is, I think, still something that is very realistically a possibility. The bulk of his time in a Fire uniform was spent in a situation that wasn't ideal for most of the players that were on that roster, right? And so I think that probably robbed us of some good moments, and it probably robbed us of some, him of some of the development that he would have had if someone like Berhalter had been in the team and consistently able to establish a structure for longer. I think it's an interesting move for him from a number of ways. Obviously, Chivas has a huge following. It's important to his family. They are a team that spends money, but I don't think anyone has really expected them to be competing for trophies in recent years, and like that era of Chivas seems like it's in the past. And one of the ways they've been trying to deal with that is kind of expanding the definition of what they count as Mexican, to the point that I'm pretty sure that if you just put onions and cilantro on a taco, they will like take a look at you if you can ball within a year or two. But like they tried K-Cal, didn't really work out, and I think that's the danger, is when you look at what happens when young American trained players go to Mexico. A lot of the time it hasn't panned out, and I think that Gutiérrez has more skill and ability than most of the people that have made that trek, and I think it'll be interesting to see if that ends up with a different outcome than what we saw from K-Cal, Brandon Vasquez, like a number of the others that have done it.
Yeah, I mean, the other side of the coin, you look at like what Alex Dejas has done at Club America, and that's not nothing. It does kind of make you wish that Gutierrez had gone somewhere like that, right? Or Monterrey.
Yeah, and Rayados with the other team that I think was seriously in the hunt. I mean, look, but ultimately though, like Zendejas spent time in Dallas's academy, but had a lot more experience playing in Mexico, even growing. Like, so it's, he's a dual national, and I think that it's a good get for the USMNT that he's in the pool, but he wasn't really trained in the United States the way that like Brian Gutiérrez was.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, Brian. I mean, hey, shout out Berwin. Shout out Berwin, the Berwin Baggio. No, I think you said it well there, Tim, where he maybe has the highest level of ability and talent out of some of these guys that have made this MLS to Liga MX move in recent years, of the more American variety. And I think the question is, whether he can be the guy, right? And we were talking about this before we started, right? Of it finally felt like for the first time in his career, we were seeing that, right? We saw it against Orlando. It was, I think I made the comment, like he scored the two biggest goals of this decade for Chicago Fire, this decade being the 2020s, right? Like the goal against Miami, and which ironically enough, not the game winner, but the dagger, and then, the goals against Orlando, you can pick whichever one you want, or the goal against Orlando, excuse me. And on the one hand, it's unfortunate that you finally see it and then he's out the door. On the other hand, like, I think, how can you not be a little bit romantic about it? It was like, I think I said this last week, but I'm reminded of, as a White Sox fan, there's a video of Carlos Rodon and Lucas Giolito in the dugout at Game 3 of the ALDS. And two guys who had been there for a long time, had never seen success. And Rodon leans over and says, "Hey man, I just wanted to see this once. I just wanted to see it once." And so I think that was, in terms of ways to go out, it's not the best, but hopefully it's a momentum he can keep moving forward. And, he'll hopefully be challenged in Liga MX in a way he wasn't in Chicago, even when he was tasked with more responsibility, and he can kind of take that step. And, that could be his foothold into the USMNT, not in 26, right? But maybe in 2030 or in a Copa America in 2028.
Yeah. And I think that that's what you're hoping. I think that's what he's hoping as well. It's very sink or swim for him there, right? And that's, I keep on making the comparison just because it's easy to make. Similar position, different circumstances somewhat, and another stop off in MLS before going on. But Georgi Mihailovic, I think, is the other easy comparison. And I think we saw the Georgi that came back from a successful time in Montreal and then a unsuccessful on the pitch, time in Europe where he just didn't fit in with the squad. They didn't really know how to use him. The Georgi that came back was a better, more mature player and is now a DP on a Toronto team that is looking like they are tired of being a doormat in the Eastern Conference. And I that's one possible trajectory. Like, I know that the Fire have a sell-on for Gutierrez with, if you were to move on a permanent deal from Chivas. I think that's probably mostly hypothetical, right? Because the most expensive transfer, I had to look it up. The most expensive transfer for Chivas of all time is still Rodolfo Pizarro making it to Monterrey from Chivas, and that was like back in 2019. I mean, Chicharito back in 2010 is still in the top 5. And transfer fees were just so much lower back then, it's almost like laughable. So Chivas has not sold a ton of guys. At the same time, I think that this is a front office that is increasingly aware that without getting rid of the club's heritage, they need to modernize some things that they've been doing if they want to compete against Club America, Rayados, and even like Cruz Azul, who knocked him out in the quarterfinal.
Do you see this as, and maybe this is a more negative light, do you see this as kind of a hard cap on his career? Because I think, if we strip away, like I said, if we strip away some of the romanticism about it, this versus even moving to another MLS club, which I think we would all like less from the perspective of now you have to play him, right? And I don't, just him as a person, I kind of doubt he would want that hypothetically, right? But it does feel a little bit like this versus going to, I don't know, somewhere in Belgium, somewhere in the Netherlands, some random team where maybe you're getting less money, less of a guarantee that you're a big player, and more just, hey, come earn your spot. It does feel like maybe it not limits him on an international stage. He could probably still be in the USMNT at some point, but it does feel like this is probably the big move in his club career a little bit. And that kind of feels like what you're beating around the bush of a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there could be one more, right? Because he's 22. At the same time, I mean, when you look at what the Premier League has been doing over the past several years, and they kind of are the trendsetter with a lot of this, and so other leagues are following, like, they don't take 22-year-olds, anymore. They want to get guys when they're 20, 21, 19, 18, right? Like, there's obviously differences for exceptional players, but they're bringing players in younger so they can help finish their development in a way that I think we didn't see in previous years. So I think like Premier League and maybe the top five in general were kind of out of the question just because of age, right? Especially if the move was happening now. And if it was stop off in the Netherlands and then try making it to the Bundesliga or something like that, I think that move was probably also closed off again, just because of the age thing and the way that the leagues are trending. Unless it was like a mid-table Bundesliga club, but then it's like, I mean, I'm not really sure to some extent if we're talking about a better overall place for him than a club that, despite, like I said, not really competing for trophies as much these days, but is still one of the biggest clubs on the continent.
Yeah. Yeah. Well put. And who knows, to your point, if this is, if the last few years can round into more of a winning form for Chivas, you're right back there, right? It's not like it's a small side looking to fight their way back up, right? They are a pretty historical club in terms of Mexican football. And so, it would be great to see Brian Gutiérrez kind of lead the charge to get them back to where they were at one point, right?
And I mean, look, we did see K Cal, who's almost exactly the same age as Guti. I think he's maybe a couple months younger. Spend some time with Chivas and move back to MLS. And that's a different age, a different place. Like we saw Brandon Vasquez move back. So it's not like it is really a one-way door, but I think that there will be additional pressure on him to figure some things out in ways that wouldn't have been if he stuck around MLS and with the Fire or any other club, because there was interest from within MLS for him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, well said. Like we said before, obviously wishing the best. It's nice to, maybe have a rooting interest in Liga MX if you didn't before. So all the best to Brian Gutiérrez. #thanks for the memories. And we'll keep on moving here. A couple more pieces of Fire news that we'll talk about a little bit. Jason Shokalook officially signed to a first-team deal from Chicago Fire 2. He's a Golden Boot winner in MLS Next Pro. Arguably should have been the MVP of MLS Next Pro. Now getting his opportunity. Played well, right? Pulled an assist in his one appearance against DC last year. Likely going to fill that third center forward slot. I would imagine the club is still looking for somebody to back up Hugo Kuipers, but an interesting player, right? I think as he continues to mature and develop physically, could he be a long-term piece on the roster? We'll have to wait and see. But I mean, he's probably already ahead of, no disrespect, but a guy like Dean Bolts, in terms of pecking order on the roster. So exciting to see him get his first team opportunity.
Yeah. And I think that Bolts is around the same age as him because they both did go to, I guess Bolts is just 19 because he only went to college for that 1 year and came on Generation Adidas.
22.
Yeah. And I think he's 22 or 23. I think one of the things that Greg has mentioned sort of in passing when talking to him about MLS Next Pro, which was going into last year, one of the big differences coming into a job in MLS versus when he left, when MLS academies were just in a very different place in the ecosystem, was the level of competition in Next Pro. And I think that one of the challenges is like you've got guys like Pareba, Jason Shokalook, who like even Omari Glasgow, who spent time there, where Sergio Orahel, I mean, the guys that were not really learning anything effective in MLS Next Pro, but were not necessarily 100% ready to just step into an MLS roster. And how do you handle that gap? I will say striker is one of those positions where like if you can get into the right, like if your game is you get into the right places to make yourself available for goals, and you have that skill and you've got the speed and ability to do that and stuff like that, it does translate. And that's why we've seen a number of guys come from the college ranks, go through the super draft and end up making a difference playing as a striker. And I think that that's probably a good thing if you're Shokalook. But I think that you're right. Like end of the day, it does still feel like a position where the Fire could use some reinforcement, especially because Barlow, who's the only really MLS proven striker on the roster behind Kuipers, is now gone.
Okay, I was about to say, I don't know if you know this, Tim. You might have to sit down.
Yeah, no, I'm right. So like you moved on from Barlow, right? Like I think from a salary cap point of view, that was the right move to make.
I think there's a chance that even just straight up player for player, this is an upgrade. I don't think it's given. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm not saying it definitely is, but is it on the board? I think even without accounting for salary, 100%.
Yeah, I think that is a possibility, but I think that right now, one of the things that you expected Tom Barlow to do last season, one, we were fortunate, right? In that, Kuipers was healthy the entire year and didn't miss any substantial time. I think that like if he had to miss a stretch of games, it would have been a big question of sort of like, where is some of this offense coming from? Not because he was involved in all of it, right? Like we talked about the season that Zinkernagel had, but because with Kuipers as a striker, it created more space for everyone around him, because if you were acting like he wasn't going to score, he was going to be in a place to do so. And that just made the moving pieces around him a lot more dynamic and all of that. I think if it had been a long-term stretch of it's, going to be Tom Barlow, I think that the Fire's attack would have been a lot easier to figure out. And so one, there's that. And the other thing though is like one of the jobs that I think you were trusting Barlow to do, which the Fire didn't do a lot because they let, Hugo out there for 90 minutes, game in, game out, is when you're in a position where you're trying to maybe see out a win, or something, just see out a result, you bringing a guy on that you trust will not cause problems for you, will help press to keep the pressure on, keep the temperature up a little bit, and help see out those results. And I don't know if, especially early on, you trust a guy who hadn't done that in this league to do that the same way, because it's one of those like the number one thing is don't make a mistake, and then the number two thing is see the number one thing.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I do think there is a benefit as well of I'm curious. Like, look, we saw a lot of MLS Next Pro guys get minutes this year. Omari Glasgow played a lot of games. Justin Reynolds played more, like which was kind of surprising to look at. Justin Reynolds played a lot. Christopher Cupps played a lot. In the midfield, I mean, I feel okay calling Sergio Orahel a Fire 2 player in that he came up through Fire 2, right? Obviously, that's not his quality now. You saw Sam Williams get run. I wouldn't be shocked to see a good amount of him, even if it's just in, early Open Cup fixtures, even if it's just in midweek fixtures with some schedule congestion due to the World Cup. And who knows, right? I don't know. I'm excited to see what he can do. It's interesting, and we'll see what else the club does at that position and how much they're going to trust him going into 2026. To round out the table here, still no official update on Omari Glasgow. We do expect him to be back with the club in January when his loan expires. It does, I think, still beg the question of what do you do about your international roster spots, because the Fire are going to need to get creative there, barring a few more green cards coming in that we weren't expecting.
Yeah. And I just had a piece that went up. It's up now on Men in Red 97 that kind of goes over the Fire's roster and where it stands. 12 players by my count currently require international slots. You get 8. You can trade for more with other teams, but when you're hunting for that many, I think people kind of can sense the desperation a little bit. I don't expect the Fire to be shopping for 4 international slots, right?
And Miami already has 15 of them, so.
Yeah. Well, and that, I mean, part of that is like, where is the market going with this, right? But players don't require international slots once they get green cards. And that process can take a variable length of time. Arnaud Case somehow was able to get one in 1 year. Obviously, Jonathan Bamba, also a French citizen. So I'm not saying that will happen, but it's a possibility.
And there are more obvious places to get it, right? Philip Zenkernagle being Danish, Jonathan Bamba being French. With all due respect, a little more likely than
Hugo's been here a year. Hugo's been here a year prior, right, to that.
Yeah.
So,
and also another EU member,
yeah. Well, it varies from country. There's and that's one of the things that the Fire have expensive lawyers for with this stuff is they kind of know you can't really cut the line, but these legal companies can tell you where the line is short and tell you which line you should be wanting to stand in, right? And I think that helps with these things. Omari, though, has lived in the United States for a number of years. It would be a possibility that he could get one. A little of it depends on what visa he had when he came in, which would possibly be a different one than the one that Kuipers had. But I think it's Omari, I think it just is an interesting question of exactly what role he's supposed to be playing with the Fire. And I think that maybe pushes him to maybe a movable piece, just because I think that he does have a lot of upside and you want him to be in a place where he's getting a ton of minutes. And I don't know if that's Chicago. But I don't know that it's not.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about Omari specifically, and then we'll move on, we don't want to spend too much time on this, is I think if Jonathan Dean didn't exist, he played really well in that more traditional winger right back role that Greg Berhalter has his fullbacks playing, right? So very much high and outside, not necessarily in the fray, more moving the ball forward and then delivering it in. He played really well in that role. And that's kind of what he is, right? And I think that's maybe why he has struggled as a forward, especially in Greg's system, right? Of trying to play inside where you need to be a little more physical, and that's not really his game. So it's unfortunate because, you look at a guy like Jonathan Dean who just signed an extension and he is just better defensively. He is a higher floor player on maybe not a better deal, but long-term, probably a better deal in terms of the ceiling isn't as high. So it's unfortunate for Omari that maybe he'll be an odd man left out, but he is a piece you want to keep. And maybe that involves a loan to somewhere else, an MLS that could use a guy on a cheap contract who can eat a lot of minutes and play at a, potentially a high enough level.
Yeah, at the same time, I sort of suspect he will be back. The Fire's move to send him out on loan was more of something for desperation because of roster needs, rather than they wanted him to be loaned out. And I just, think it's kind of worth just putting that out there. Looks like he's spending a little time in Guyana now, so that's good, with family. And again, he's one of the pieces that I think it just is a question again of he was given opportunities. What opportunities will he be given in 2026? And if there's not going to be them, then how do you find the right way to kind of move him on?
Yeah, no, well put. Let's zoom out for a second here as MLS free agency has officially kicked off. We're going to kind of run through some big stories and we'll kind of tie them together with a common theme. First one, I'll point out, there was some reporting this week from Diorio Ole that the Fire are potentially in on midfielder Emeki Emele from RSL. There's been, I believe, some reporting. There's a lot of offers, but nobody really wants to bite in terms of the folks at RSL and moving him. We'll keep you updated, obviously. Not much more to say than that, other than we've seen the report, and we'll let you know if there's more to say. Looking around MLS, as announced this week, 90% of this is from unofficial friend of the show, Tom Bogert. DC United signing Ty Barigo from Philadelphia Union. Philadelphia Union also selling Defender of the Year Jakub Glesnes to LA Galaxy for some reason. Apparently, neither of these guys played in the second Bundesliga, and Bradley Carnell is tired of pretending they did. Portland signing.
That's not even the joke about Philly, though. Philly's whole thing that is almost like a meme is they have a pretty successful season on the whole, and they react to that by selling 1 to 2 of their best players. They've just done it so many times. It's almost like if they don't do it, you're like, did you guys forget? What's going on?
It's a confluence of things. All right. Bradley Carnell wants second Bundesliga players. The Philadelphia front office wants to sell their best players. They can do both. Brandon Bai going from New England Revolution to Portland Timber. Miami announced, Miami signing Fortuna Mora, from Racing Club in Argentina. Shocker. an Argentinian player, another right back coming in on a free transfer. Shocker, a free transfer to come to Miami. And Luis Suarez also coming back on a 1-year deal. San Diego FC is signing Lewis Morgan from New York Red Bull, and Walker Zimmerman is going to Toronto FC, not on a DP deal, likely a max TAM situation. I think the overwhelming thread here I found, Tim, was, save Miami and Toronto. It seems like there's a good amount of talent leaving the East, at least in the free agency and intra MLS moves. And it does kind of set you up for next year in terms of the Fire are adding pieces. They are certainly not subtracting. And you wonder, do you have does the stature increase in the East next year? I think that's the hope, right?
Yeah, I think that there probably will be players coming into a lot of these teams, right? Like I think Miami is going to be good either. Like,
they're Miami.
You're losing some, famous legends, but they also are going to be adding pieces, and it's just like they're Miami. I think we just talked about Toronto, right? Like they are, I think, not going to be a joke like they were early in this season, and they weren't a joke by the end of the year. And I think that them being a dangerous team is just one more club that can come and get you. The thing about Philly is like a lot of the time they have sold their best players and ended up better somehow, despite not replacing them on paper even. And they have also brought in guys. So it's, it is, I think that's just as the league, right? Like the league, I think has somehow, without us really realizing it or talking about it, it wasn't like a big, we got rid of the roster rules thing that changed, but we're now seeing teams competing at a higher level than they did just a few years ago.
And it does feel like for a league that prides itself on parity, there does seem to be a gap opening up, right? And I think there's a gap
between the haves and have-nots. Yeah,
it's a little more. It's a little more NFL than NBA, right? In terms of like, hey, we're going to do a 2-year rebuild. We'll be back and rather than 6 years from now, we'll maybe be competing, right? So I do think it'll rotate. And maybe
yes and no, right?
Injury dependent and window dependent, but
I think that the other thing we're seeing is the roster rules have loosened up enough now that even though there's still a lot of restrictions, like you can pay Walker Zimmerman, $1.7 million, but if like he's smart enough to know this because he's from the league, but like if he was holding out for 1.8, it would have been a deal breaker because you would have had to make him a DP, right? And at the same time, despite not being able to pay a talented, international center back $1.8 million, you can blow $25 million on a guy that's going to smoke cigarettes in training.
Interesting thought here, and this is more on the fly, league-wide in general. I wonder if we see a rise of players running out their contracts. Because if you're Walker Zimmerman and you move even on a cash for right, like that still gets counted against your cap hit, right? So Walker Zimmerman, if he's a transfer now inside MLS, he can't make $1.7 million. He can make 1.2, right? Otherwise, he's going to be a DP. I think that's maybe an interesting unintended consequence of potentially shorter contracts and players seeing out their contracts so that they can sign bigger free agent deals for a guy. Like it's a specific use case. Don't get me wrong. It's for the Walker Zimmermans of the world. But I just think it's an interesting thought.
Well, so Zimmerman was out of contract, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. And the thing with, I think we're going to see before it really hits in a lot of ways, I think we're going to see changes to the roster rules to make at least some parts of this a lot more flexible. Just because of those things that you're saying. And like there's all kinds of other weird restrictions of like every team, the Fire and every other team when they were signing Kellen Acosta and looking to sign Kellen Acosta ahead of 2024 were restricted in what they could pay based on his previous contract. So you couldn't even offer him a max TAM because of weird free agency rules and all kinds of stuff like that you're like, it just is annoying, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm not saying unlimited spending, but the fact that a team couldn't have offered, $100K more if that would have made a difference in getting someone that at the time was considered one of the big pieces on the board in terms of free agency. I think we'll see a lot of transition with a lot of these things in the next few years. I think the cash for market, I wouldn't be surprised if one of the ways that ends up getting used a lot is U22s because of what you mentioned, right? Where you can, the Fire were able to pay Brian Gutiérrez more because he was a Fire homegrown U22. That's not something that you could do in trading for a guy. But other than that, have a lot of U22s that haven't worked out. I think that there's probably MLS teams that are saying, not exactly what you hoped, but we think we can get something out of this guy. Let's give you some money for it. And because you can do unlimited transfer fees with the U22, that the cash for doesn't hit your cap the same way. And I think that that's a possibility we're about to see more of, as well as the DPs, right? Because for players lower on the roster, after a certain point, it just becomes, you just trade GAM for the guy, and you can do that for like a max TAM player. So you could get a guy earning $1.7 million, spend GAM, and in a way that restricts the transfer fee, which is what MLS is trying to get away from, of not having a real value setter from within the league. And I think that's why you're going to see some of these rules change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they'll probably change a year after they should. But let's talk a little bit. Yeah, minimum. Let's talk a little bit kind of Fire roster at large. There's a lot of names out there in MLS free agency that I think we both agree would be good fits. The question is, how available are they? The big name is Christian Benteke, right? Even at 34 years old, I think still one of the best center forwards in MLS, one of the best in the air in MLS. We talked about guys like Hassani Dotson in the past, Robin Lode. The one big one I want to mention, and I'll also throw out a completely unrelated name as maybe an interesting thought I had that I don't think you liked as much as I did. Mikel Ure from Philadelphia Union is available. One of the better kind of space finders in MLS in terms of a guy you can bring in off the bench, get a goal when you need it. Fire obviously looking for, a backup 9. And I floated this out, and we can just talk roster at large, but I floated this out because I think it's an interesting idea. There's no secrets that Mo Salah is potentially available. Chicago Fire, as reported by The Athletic, were in on him this summer, trying to bring him over when he was out of contract with Liverpool, obviously then signed a new deal. It looks like he'll be available in the winter window because of some disagreements with Arne Slot. Tim, I pose this question to you. Do you consider potentially moving on from Hugo Kuipers, signing a Christian Benteke, a Mikel Ure, somebody in that realm, and then also trying to sign Mo Salah with that available DP slot? Because as of now, you would have to move either Leo Barroso or Victor Radojevic off of U22 to bring in a third DP. I think it's interesting.
I think you just move one of them off the U22 and add the third DP, right? Like the Fire now.
But then where does he play, right?
Well, and that's going to be a question no matter what. And I think the answer is kind of like where he wants, as much as he wants, sort of when he wants. And that would be the case with anyone of that stature, which I know is sidestepping the answer. I still think Mo Salah would be a massive get in a lot of ways for the Fire. I don't realistically think that he's coming to MLS. I would never say never to that, obviously, but it just seems like the circumstances and the way this is going down feels a lot more like maneuvering on his part to try to get Arne Slot out, or at least get his wings clipped, a lot more than it's him really pushing to leave. Otherwise, it wouldn't be happening this publicly. And I think that in end of the day, like I don't know what level of interest an Egyptian player would have in going to Saudi Arabia, because there's, some negative history just in terms of like the sporting, what would the Egyptian fan base see and all that kind of stuff. But I think that you have to think the Saudis would try hard. There's a couple of teams that have available international spots in Saudi Arabia that can afford him in ways that a few teams in MLS could. The Fire could put real money towards him, but I don't think that they'd put the money that the Saudis would.
So I have two interesting thoughts here, because I've actually given it a little bit of thought. I agree with you. I think maybe the most fun thing would be you move Phillips and Gernagel inside, you let Salah play on the right, and that would be maybe the best attack in MLS, period, because the Fire were almost the best attack in MLS without him. I think two thoughts. One, the Fire have not targeted a big name like this who was under contract. So it's one thing to pay a guy $30 million a year. It's another thing to pay $50 million to get him and then pay him $30 million a year. I understand it's all funny money because Joe Mansueto is a billionaire, but I do think there's a massive difference there. B, though, and I don't think this is nothing. I'm not saying it's everything. He's an Adidas player. That's not nothing, right? And so I wouldn't be shocked if there was some kind of agreement come to, similar to Messi, similar to what would have been offered to a guy like Neymar, Kevin De Bruyne in a similar situation, right? Of, hey, you come over here, you'll get a cut of your jerseys. You'll get a cut of, whatever merch we sell with your name on it, which by the way is why there's so much messy merch out there. Like I wouldn't be, that to me is like a big plus in terms of the him coming to MLS category. And then once you say, hey, Mo Salah is coming to MLS, there's maybe 2 or 3 teams that could reasonably swing. I mean, I was exaggerating at 50 million, but like, it's hard for me to think he'd go for less than 30. He had 40 goal contributions in the Premier League last year. I understand he's 33 years old, but he's still a world-class player.
I will say that transfer values don't happen in a vacuum, right? And I think you have to look at like, who are you bidding against? And there's 1 or 2 teams inside Arabia that you may be bidding against. And again, if he just says he's not interested, then he's not interested. And the transfer fee would be going to Liverpool and not to Salah, right? Like he and his agent may get a cut of it, but that's not typically the way that these things work all the time around the league, right? So I don't know what transfer value Mo Salah would actually command in the real market. It wouldn't be 0. But again, like Liverpool ultimately have to make a choice here. Like they have to decide, are they sticking with one of the best players, if not the best player in the club history, or are they sticking with a manager that was very effective last year and made Salah very effective last year? And I think in some ways has been acting a little bit more like the values that Liverpool espouses as a club than what Salah has been acting in this case, which seems almost out of character for him, which is why I think a lot of this is sort of playing things up for the Canberras to try to get something to happen. But, like the last thing on this, Bastian Schweinsteiger was an Adidas athlete, and that was very important in him coming to MLS and ultimately to the Fire, right? In terms of they basically put up money to make it happen as a way of Adidas had this guy that they had agreed to pay money to, and they thought it would be a way to help get him in places where he'd be moving more jerseys than he was on the bench at like Man United. I don't know what it would cost to get Mo Salah. I doubt that it's 50 million. I don't know who you're bidding against, right? Like, I mean, Barcelona would probably like to sign him. Barcelona would like to do lots of things the same way that like I would like to drop $4 million on a yacht, but like I don't like have the $4 million.
Tim, you just need to start selling a cat plushie, and then you can buy your $4 million yacht.
Yeah. Just find out what grift some of the people in DC are up to, and just start following them.
Obviously not 50 million. I think you're probably in that 25-ish range, just because there will be other bidders, even inside MLS. Like,
yeah, and that's why MLS in part has the somewhat bizarre rules that it does, where you get to call dibs and get discovery rights on a guy that has been whose face has been on billboards and like it was not EAFC at the time, but like I guess I've started to call it that, like on EAFC boxes and stuff. Like, discovered this guy. We saw him on the front of a video game. I mean, look, I think to a certain extent, I'm talking myself into this a little bit with this, but it's like if you're paying him $25 million a year for say 3 years, right? And you think this is going to be a difference maker in the trajectory of the history of the Fire, if you're Joe Mansueto, like that's the argument you'd be making. If you're in for $75 million and it's a $25 million transfer fee, is that extra $25 million of that transfer fee, that $100 million, is that going to change the value of it? I don't know. Now again, like, is Al Hilal going to offer Liverpool $60 million for him and offer to pay Salah, $80 million a year and not like in something in the 20 range? I mean, it could happen.
Yeah. Look, I think it's, as of right now, I think it's more interesting in our heads than it is in the real world. I think we're both probably leaning towards the nothing ever happens side of the coin than the, oh my gosh, something's happening side of the coin. But, it's on the board. And I'm curious to see, as we head towards the new year, kind of what actually boils over in Liverpool. Do we stop seeing him feature? Do we, I wouldn't be shocked if he left. And I think if he left, Chicago's as good a bet as any, given that you have to pay a fee to get him. Because I don't think a Napoli is going to pay $25 million the way they, signed Kevin De Bruyne on a free, right? It's little things like that.
Yeah. And right. There's a limited number of teams in the world. It's crazy that the Fire are in some of these conversations, not as much with Salah as I think they were with Neymar, but that doesn't really make it less likely, right? Because a lot of this is some journalists of maybe less than fantastic ethics just picking names that they think will help get clicks, right? But it is just crazy that the Fire have been in real conversations with some of the biggest names that have moved over the past year. And I think that just shows how ambitious they are. To get to your overarching point, though, are there situations where you think you'd move on from Hugo Kuipers? I would say never. I just don't think it's realistic, regardless of what else the Fire would be doing.
I do think you have to kind of ask the question, though, right? I mean, you have the option, of course, right? So it's not like he's gone after this year, but if somebody comes in and offers you a reasonable deal for Hugo Kuipers, I do think you have to consider it. If not, I think you need to start thinking about an extension because, frankly, he is still a high caliber MLS center forward. And frankly, the other side of this coin is I guess the best way I can say is that to me is the obvious spot where if you're going to spend $20 million on something, that I think you can improve the most. And that's not a knock against Hugo by any means. I think he's a great player. But, we talked about it before of in a hypothetical world, do you swap out Mo Salah for Joe Bamba? And it's probably not, because Mo Salah is not giving you what Joe Bamba does off the ball. Granted, he's not giving you what Hugo Kuipers does either, but you don't necessarily expect that from your number 9 center forward. Does that make sense?
I think Salah plays on the right a lot. We've seen him kind of be a second striker, so that would be a possibility. But I think that, hypothetically, right? If we were to put Mohamed Salah onto the Fire roster tomorrow and you could either move one player off or work with what you've got, I think what you probably do is you have Salah on the right, Bamba on the left, and you move Zinkernagel more centrally, and then you sort of try that. And then I think the other thing is you just sort of see how, if you do play a second striker kind of position and then have Zinkernagel on the left, see what the interplay is with Hugo and kind of go from there. We didn't really see Zinkernagel doing a lot at the 10. And I don't think there's an article that should be out by the time that this is up about the Fire's sort of depth chart, where they are, what the needs are on it. And, Zinkernagel could play at the 10. That's something that he's done before. I think that was part of why he was brought in. Right now, the way the roster is constructed, you don't want to move him away from the position where he broke offensive records for the club. But if you are doing that because you're putting Mo Salah in that spot, I think that's a different answer. I think that...
Sorry, and not to interrupt you, but maybe the long answer here, or the long answer made short, is that's not the move right now, right? You have, like we mentioned before, arguably the best attack in MLS, certainly the best outside of South Florida. And do you just go ahead and pay Mikel Ure whatever you can, and now you have a real backup striker, a real second striker who you can put on when you're chasing a goal? It's not a spoiler because it's out by the time you're hearing this, but in Tim's in depth chart that he made, it's menred97.com. Go take a look at it while you're listening to this. They do have the Fire lining up in a back 3 to start the year, once he's returned from injury, Andre Franco alongside Jay Davila in the midfield. And I almost wonder if this is more a year of building around the edges than it is going for that one big home run swing.
Yeah, I think that the Fire do want to make a swing for the fences at some point before the new stadium opens. I don't know. Typically, you'd see that happening in the summer, not the winter. So I don't know if it's now. And obviously, Franco's injury adds kind of a confounding wrench to all of this, where it's you do have a guy that you do want to have a very valuable place, but you're not going to have him, at least for the early going in 2026. And who knows how much of 2026 he'd be available for. I do think striker is one of the positions of need. And maybe that's to play with Hugo in a couple of places, and we saw the Fire try, like typically late in games and small situations like that. Somewhere we saw Barlow and Hugo, and I don't think you got a ton from it. I think if it was like Mikhail Ure and Hugo Kuipers, that it's a completely different look. So either way, I think it is just a massive position of need, even though we talked about Shokalook and the upside that he's got. I mostly stick with the back five for now because I don't think that there is really a great way to line people up in 4-3-3, which is the other position that we've seen Greg Berhalter favor a lot. I think long term, the 4-3-3 is probably where the team will play under Berhalter. I think that it's a question of personnel, and I like right now, other than Zinkernagel, I'm not sure that there's anyone that you really would want to be playing as the 10, and I don't think that you move Zinkernagel from the right wing to play him at the 10.
And especially not with, one of the things we haven't talked about is like Leo Barroso's coming back. And I think nobody's happy he was hurt, right? But that extended time off, I think in a weird way could end up being very good for him of you get the chance to kind of remove yourself from the game, learn, understand the system better, kind of watch how it plays out. And now you get to start the 2026 season on as much rest as you could possibly have. You get the full preseason and you are the guy, right? As much as we know, as much as this is a Jonathan Dean fan club, like Leonardo Barroso gives you an edge that Jonathan Dean does not, especially going forward. And I'm ecstatic to see what that partnership with Philip Zinkernagel turns into in 2026. And to your point, Tim, I don't want to take Phil away from another dynamic playmaker that he'll now get to be alongside.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's one of the exciting things is like you look at this roster and there are guys that I think took some time to adjust in the league, right? And now you're like, what can you be? I mean, Barroso, Jay Davila is the other one that I think really sticks out. We didn't see Victor Radojevic at all. I think he was brought in to make it so that you don't rely on Andrew Gutman to be playing every minute of the Fire's entire season through all competitions, which is more or less what he had to do. But and I think that he's also brought in to really start pushing him for minutes. And I think that that's, again, like it's a good problem to have if you got too many guys that are looking like they deserve to start. One more thing, though, just to throw this out there, something was in the back of my head about it. Talking about Mo Salah for one more second. Mboazi is going to be with South Africa for AFCON. They are facing Egypt on December 26th, Boxing Day. So put that on your calendars, and it could have special Fire interest by that point. For all we know.
that could be fun. Hey,
if not just the Mboazi, seeing him face Mo Salah would be interesting TV.
Tim, I think what you're forgetting here is that Mbazelu Mbozaze is very, very, very unprofessional. Tim, okay, he might miss his flight. God, he's a terrible person. Chicago's stupid. He's actually playing for Fire too. Sorry, we weren't going to talk about this, but
that was a whole. Jesus, I don't know. All I got to say is that despite those remarks, which were both sexist and racist, and just like what you're taking guys into camp ahead of a tournament and you're chewing guys out, like what the heck kind of a locker room you're trying to build? Like it just seems like ineffective coaching. On top of his remarks being sexist towards the agent, calling him what was it, like a little woman?
It's
a nice little
girl,
woman or something like that. Yeah. And racist.
You literally
despite
said
all
he's
of
coming in a black man and leaving a white man. It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah. And some people are like, that's not racist. He'd be afraid. I'm like, yeah. So we've never had problematic history of guys, white guys physically threatening black guys that are working for them in Africa or other places.
In South Africa.
I know. Here's this thing though. If we're grading on a curve in terms of white guys from Belgium that have gone to Africa and been put in charge of something, he could still be one of the less racist people in that situation. Which
the funniest thing to me, shout out to all the South African people who I've just interacted with on Twitter in the last 2 weeks. There's a lot of really fun, interesting, cool people who are very excited about this young player. And I love it because it's cool. It's almost like if, I don't know, it's like, I imagine it's like Christian Pulisic kind of, when he was at Dortmund, right? It's like, oh, there's this guy. It is hilarious to me, the amount of like the disconnect between South African soccer fans who are Umboase is the best young player we have. He's incredible. He's destined for greatness. He's not going to be on the World Cup roster because he went to Chicago. Like, what are we doing? What are we talking about? It's a better league, a better team, a higher level, more eyeballs, better at getting players to Europe. Like, the whole thing feels a little silly.
Yeah, I think that look, the thing is, there's a couple of teams in South Africa that I think compete at a level that is different than the rest of their league.
Yes.
And arguably, like, those teams could perform in MLS and probably do some interesting things. And like they spend money, but as a whole, I think that the league quality in MLS is significantly higher just because of the infrastructure development that's been happening over 25 years, because of the spending that's been happening, like a lot of things around that. And it, until recently though, the thing was MLS was a league that would move Americans on to Europe occasionally. It started happening more over the past 5 or 6 years though. What we've seen is MLS is a place that is getting young players, having them play from around the world, and then able to move them on to Europe. And the Fire were one of the first teams that really kind of did that, moving John Duran to Aston Villa. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something that we're going to be seeing a lot more of. A lot of the talents come from South America. The Fire now don't have a South American on the roster, which is a huge change from where they were 5 years ago.
Are we counting Guyana as Central America?
I mean, it's in CONCACAF is what I'm counting. So it's geographically in South America, but soccer-wise, just the same way that Turkey and Israel are in Europe.
Shout out soccer-wise. Shout out David Goss.
Yeah. But look, so it's, they not having players that are from there were multiple players that grew up in Argentina on the roster this time a year ago. They're gone now.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is not because that, Greg Berhalter and Greg Broughton in the front office have a problem with South Americans. It's because you end up paying through the nose for what you get from Argentina and Brazil and a number of other places. And like, they have sort of figured out, like, they hear MLS and they think, not just can we get a payday, because I think that that's something that isn't a problem, but it's how can we like shirk these guys for all the money that they're worth? And that is not what you get. I think South Africa is becoming more connected to the global game, and this is one of the ways that happened. And we saw players really succeeding from South Africa last year, the way that we hadn't really seen in the past. And I think it's something that's going to happen more. And MLS is going to be one of the ways that South Africa starts getting players to clubs around the world.
Yeah. No, well put, and exciting to see him. I mean, look, I'm excited to have the guy on the roster. You made the point about, look, I don't necessarily agree with your overarching point, but it is correct that this is maybe the best pair of calves we've seen since Shaqiri left.
Yep.
I think you should also consider Jay Davila for that, but I guess it's different because he's tall.
Yeah, I think that the not being as like Bosch and Schweinsteiger is the only guy that had both like the height, kind of, although he wasn't like super tall, and the calves.
Yeah, no, I think where I kind of want to wrap up roster talk, and we're getting to that time. You made the point earlier of like, you're kind of looking for holes in this team, and a lot of it is around the edges, right? It's a backup striker. It's another midfielder to hold you over until Andre Franco gets here. The exciting thing, I think, from my perspective right now is last year it was like, oh my God, we need more buyouts. Every year it felt like we needed 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 buyouts. You look at the roster this year, I think the only person really in contention for a buyout is Kellen Acosta, and I think you'll probably be able to move him. And even if you don't, unless you desperately need that cap space, he's a good enough depth piece that he's worth keeping around, even at a bloated salary.
Yeah, I think and the question is also for the player, right? Like, one of the reasons you may want to use the buyout is it can give a player additional options. I think it's unfortunate that Kellen Acosta didn't seem to really work out. I really thought he was due for a rebound year after a not great 2024 and 2025. Yes. I'm disappointed it didn't happen. I know he's disappointed. I still think he has good soccer in him. I think the question becomes if it's not going to be in Chicago, because I don't think it's going to be in Chicago. Like, I have him third in the depth chart for defensive midfielders behind Jay Davila and Mauricio Pineda. I just think that's the reality of sort of where he is with these things.
Yeah. I mean, look, if Sergio Orhel doesn't have a breakout year, he probably does get his chance at a rebound, right? That was the plan before he got injured.
Yeah, I think some of it, though, is again, I don't know the full situation of what Berhalter is, the assessment is on Acosta. It seems like he did not really believe that the team would have been better with Acosta in after some point in the season. And I don't think it is not because of personal issues. It's not because of attitude or anything like that. I think it is literally just the contribution on the pitch. So again, I don't know. I just think that if you use the buyout, it's not necessarily a bad thing for the player. Like I think Arnaud Souquet benefited from the buyout because he got to keep earning his salary, stay in the United States, which was a priority for him. And it also gives the player, like, if they sign with another club at less money, the Fire would be on the hook for the difference in those salary amounts and not
it's
the whole
subject to
amount.
Offset, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it gives them an ability to keep on earning what they'd planned on earning while also finding a fit where the price that they're paying sort of reflects the past couple seasons that Acosta's had and the fact that he still, I think, is a high upside compared to what we've seen over the past year or two.
Yeah. And to that end, I don't know, like, unless he really says, hey, please let me go, I probably wouldn't use the buyout on him. Just be like, I think he's still that good, right? That you can't just let him go unless he's really pounding the table, which to his credit, he hasn't. And I do think that's important to give him that respect of like, he has conducted himself incredibly professionally.
Yes. And I think that's
because he's a player I think we both respect quite a bit.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I know we really want to wrap in a couple minutes. I will say, though, that the other thing that the Fire are up against is just MLS rosters are limited to 30 players, basically. Robert Turdina's an off-roster homegrown right now, so it doesn't count. The Fire have 29 players under contract, which means that unless you subtract, you can add one. And so it isn't just the salary cap. It's also that hard cap on the number of guys you can have in your squad that the Fire are up against. And that, again, would suggest that I would expect one or two more pieces to be moved on. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a permanent move, right? Like you could potentially see some guys, like if Omari Glasgow was able to find a loan that I think used him a little bit better, had better facilities and all that than what Loudon had last year. Like that would be a possibility just to, again, give him minutes, get him in front of the right places to keep on advancing his career. But
would love to see a loan inside MLS for Omari.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility as well. I mean, and I think Marin Haile Selassie is just he's another guy where like he has more skill than he was able to show just with the minutes that he got last year. And that's not what you want as a player personally. And like, that's not what you want as someone that like enjoys watching these players because you want to see them be able to play as much as possible, even if sometimes it's not on the team that you watch the most.
Yeah. An important note about Marin, as much as we like him as a player, also a Swiss citizen, which means he is likely not going to be getting a green card of his own volition, right? It's more that thought. The other thing I'll point out, and then we can wrap, of Christopher Mueller, with the details of his new contract, he has moved to a supplemental roster slot, which means that one single open roster spot right now is a senior slot. So not nothing, as reported by Alex Calabrese of menandred97.com. So shout out to Alex for the reporting there. But yeah, so worth noting that it is a senior roster slot open, not a supplemental spot, and that's where you may say like, oh, like you buy out on Bolts, buy out on Borsa. Like those guys are both supplemental spots, so you're likely not going to see it there if you see it. I guess you never know. Yeah, but. I think that does us in a good enough spot. We are pushing up on an hour here, so appreciate you if you're still listening to us. Tim, anything else you want to wrap or say before we wrap up?
I think we're good.
Awesome. Yeah, there will certainly be more to talk about. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. All my knuckleheads. Thank you so much for joining us here. You can follow us on all the social medias. menandred97.com is where you can find us on the website. menandred97, anywhere and everywhere that you consume social media content. For everything else, give us a follow, give us a retweet, a repost, a rethread, a blue sky, whatever they call it over there. And wherever you're listening to this, whatever podcasting platform you use, if you could give it a thumbs up, give it a like, smash that subscribe button. put the like button in a headlock and give it a noogie, that would be sweet. We genuinely appreciate it, and it goes a lot farther than I think we would think it does. And yeah, last but not least, thank you so much for joining us here around the bonfire. It's a pleasure to be here as always, and go on, you men in red.